What's going on, everybody? My name is Nick.
My name is Dave.
And this is the Deep Dive, and we are here finally to Holy Week, and we are kind of in the midst and wrapping up this Everything in Between series. What are we talking about today, Dave?
What do we talk about? Shouting and silence.
That's right. That's right.
Shouting and silence. We have both of those things, not just on Palm Sunday, but throughout the week.
That's right.
So we'll get into that.
We'll get into it. Let's do it.
All right.
All right, Dave. Well, you actually started your sermon with this conversation about parades.
Yeah, I was curious.
And some fun parades that
your experience with parades. You have experience with parades?
I do have a couple, but I wanted to ask you, have you ever been to the Comic-Con parade?
I haven't, but I always have wanted to go.
They're so fun.
Yeah.
And we just recently started going to them the last couple of years because we found a way to kind of get in and out pretty easy so you can see everything. But you know what? Like the amount of effort and work people put into the costumes and just to watch them kind of paraded around, like it's so cool. And some people even you remember the movie 300 where everybody was like ripped and all that stuff. Yeah. Like there's people who are doing workout plans so that when they wear that, they can, they'll be their 300 character for the parade and stuff like that. Like there are people that are putting in hard work to do it. So I don't know. I think parades are fun. I've never really gone out of my way to find parades, but when a parade happens around me.
I had because I grew up, or the first part of my life was in a small town, so there were parades there that were in. And then when I moved back to when I moved to Conyers, that was also more of a small town settings. The other parades that I've been to are like what you're describing. Like that was in Atlanta. I've been to the one on, the 4th of July parade in Atlanta. Yep. And, some other really more big, I've never been to the Rose Bowl parade or stuff like that.
Either.
The Disney light parade.
Sure. Done those.
That. Yeah. So you don't have the experience. Are there parades in Canton? It seems like there would have to be. There
are a few ones, especially like the homecoming parades for the schools and stuff like that. But there's not, I can't think of anything, and I might just be missing it because, like I said, I've never really sought out parades as we do this every time or whatever. Like it just kind of happens. Like if I'm in an area when a parade's happening, it's like, I'll stop and watch.
In smaller settings, it's a big deal. But because in the high school, every class would have one, every club would have one. In Conyers, our church had a float. We would do a float. So. Yeah, it's a different kind of culture than like the Rose Bowl parade or Comic-Con or any of those things. The parades after the Braves win the World Series.
Yep.
I'm sorry.
Hey, they're actually looking better.
They won a game, yeah.
They've won 3 out of their last 5.
Okay, all right. Well,
they beat the Phillies in a series, and now we're tied with 1-1 with Tampa Bay.
Yeah, all right. Well,
I'm a little happier about that.
So we digress. So we started off with parades to get us back on point. Yeah. So we started off with parades today because it is, Palm Sunday. I think we kind of think of it as a parade or progression or something as Jesus was coming down and people were standing with the branches,
palm.
And we did that in the service today, and the kids are very cute, and that's always a real high point.
Yeah, they just kept coming too. There was a lot of them.
There were. And my granddaughter, that was the first one.
I know. I was
she's 3 months
Dave
old.
Being grandpa.
So Anna was sitting in the middle, and she had her camera ready, and I knew she wouldn't because where Teresa came with her, and she didn't make it all the way into the front. So I just got up and went over there and took a video and some pictures.
Yeah, I saw it. I was like, look at Grandpa
so
Dave. This is so cute.
Y'all going to have to get used to that as we get through that.
It's fine with me. It doesn't bother me.
So we kind of started there, and the reason I wanted to do that, and the reason I talked about the Conyers St. Patrick's Day parade specifically was because in that parade, everybody is in the parade.
Yeah, it was a part of it.
It's part of it. And that was the weird thing the first time that I went was like, where do we line up for the parade? Oh, you're in it. Yeah, we just so
start walking.
Start walking, yeah. So because in a sense, as we're invited into all this, we're invited in to participate in the parade. And there was more than one parade that day. Had you ever heard that before?
Yeah.
I think it's something that's been more. I hadn't heard it until recent years, and I think it's been something that's been more emphasized in recent years of the two parades, the Roman Empire parade that came in from the west, and then Jesus in the procession of the palms that came in from the east. The one from the west, just if you didn't hear the sermon, or just to remind you, the occasion that all this was taking place, the Holy Week, as we call it in the Christian faith, was Passover for the Jewish people. And so from a town that was around 25 to 50,000 people, which for that day and age was a pretty big city, but it would swell to like 150 to 200,000 people as Jewish people from really all over the world, but certainly within, a week's walking distance, would come there for the week because they were celebrating Passover, to take the Passover meal there, to go to the temple and to atone for their sins with their sacrifices, animal sacrifices, and that sort of thing. So it was a huge pilgrimage.
Yeah.
Some people did it annually. Some people, at least one time in their life, would come to Jerusalem, no matter where they were in the world, to be a part of this. And so there were, like a lot of religious things, there's religions, there are various sort of extremes in them. And like in today, you see in both Christianity and Islam, you see the sort of military kind of, you've got the
extremist kind
theocracy
of
kind of people in the Christian faith. And of course, the Islamic, a lot of the terrorists are super, super religious. Well, that exists within Judaism too.
Right.
And it's the zealots, of which Judas Iscariot was a part of. And so they were expecting Jesus to be a military ruler because that's all they knew. That's where they thought. I mean, like the reason that they called Caesar God or worshiped him as God, the Romans did,
right,
is because of the power that he had.
Yeah.
And so on this week, to keep those revolutionaries down, they sent an incredible military presence to Jerusalem to say, you guys stay under control. And if there were any revolutionaries in the mix, they wanted to see all the might of Rome put on full focus. And so, they would come in with their chariots and full regalia and all that stuff. It wasn't the Caesar that was coming, though. It was Pontius Pilate,
right,
who was the governor of Rome, all coming in for the week just to make sure they could maintain the order. On the other side, you've got Jesus coming as a peaceful king.
On a donkey.
On a donkey,
Yeah.
which is symbolic as well.
Yep.
And also it is fulfilling Old Testament scripture, which the Pharisees would have known of. And so it's like, we gotta quell this kind of talk right now. Because there is, we are in the Roman Empire and we got to keep our mouths shut. And so as Jesus is coming down, all those hosannas, God save us. They didn't need to be saved. Rome had saved them.
Yeah.
That would have been the thought.
Right.
Hail Jesus, King of the Jews. There already was a king. It was Caesar. And so as Jesus is coming down from, across the Kidron Valley, the Pharisees come to Jesus. This is the key text today, and said, get your disciples get them, to quit this shouting and all this stuff. They got to be quiet. And Jesus says to them, well, if they don't shout out, the rocks will cry out. Which I, said it's a very rocky place. So it was kind of a living illustration as Jesus looked around. You can imagine how loud that would be if the rocks were crying out. And so what were the Pharisees afraid of?
I mean, they must have been afraid of losing power.
Rome, all of those things.
Yeah.
They were certainly afraid of Rome because Romans, people who dissented, if you towed the company line and went away with their oppressive things, paid your taxes, did all that stuff, kept your mouth shut, you could live, what they called Pax Romana, the peace of Rome. But it was an oppressive peace.
Right.
That was the only world that they knew. They couldn't imagine this kind of peace that Jesus was trying to usher in.
Right.
And so, whereas, anybody that disagreed with him, they tried to shut down, and they had ways of doing that, even crucifixion, which was, pretty frequently done in the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
Anybody that was seen to be an enemy of Rome or speaks up against Rome or causes Rome problems, they would crucify them in a very public and humiliating way. And of course, that's where we're headed on Friday.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that was that. So, we draw this sort of distinction between empire, the powers of the empire, and the powers of the kingdom of God, which are very, very different.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating too when you kind of think of both these kind of parades, and because where Jesus came in, wasn't that kind of like the poorer part of town too? Like,
right. Yeah. That's my understanding of it. That where he was coming up from Bethany and over the Mount of Olives into the Kidron Valley, and the people there were people that had, a lot of them would have followed him or knew of him. From the other side, it was a little more wealthy, and he was coming down from the Mediterranean area with all his chariots and stuff like that. So yeah, that's my understanding. And then his first act. I talked about trying to do this parallel, or this distinction between, when do we shout? When is the shouting? It's very appropriate to shout the hosannas. Mm-hmm. That's when we should be shouting. But watching Jesus, he doesn't rile up his group of folks because he knew his purpose.
Right.
He knew what he intended to do, but he wasn't going to shut them up.
Yeah.
And so... and then he's silent at very strategic times throughout the week. But one place that he wasn't silent was one of his first acts. It says in Scripture, different Gospels recorded a little bit differently, but generally the pattern is Jesus came in that first night after that parade, after walking over from Bethany. He goes in and he sees he sees all the temple. Money changers in the temple and stuff like that, and then he leaves, and he goes home to Bethany, where he's staying with Mary and Martha and Lazarus over there. Right. And the next morning he comes in. The first thing he does, it's like he's been sitting there thinking about it all night.
Yeah, probably has.
And he comes in. The first thing he does is to turn over all those tables, all that kind of stuff. And so, that was definitely, you would think there's some shouting that was going on during that.
If not, it was loud.
It was loud.
As people's money and all this stuff going everywhere.
But yet you see him because of the way they were taking advantage of the poor, the people that were coming, many who had come from, no telling how far away, and maybe they had brought their animal to sacrifice, and they would get there, and the money exchangers and the people selling the animals say, we got to inspect that lamb.
Not good enough. You have to buy one of ours.
Not good enough. You have to buy one of ours. You have to buy a temple lamb. And, you got to exchange your money there because you got to have the temple currency. So go over there and exchange the money and then come back here and you can buy one. And so, it just ended up being a real burden on them and caused them a lot of harm. And so, that is the big outrage that Jesus has for the week. The rest of the week, as we're talking about, shouting and silence, Jesus is very intentionally subdued and quiet. He lets his actions speak on what we call the traditional Maundy Thursday, which for them would have been the highlight of why everybody was in town, including Jesus, was to have the Passover meal. Yeah. And Jesus begins that by washing the disciples' feet and showing humility. And they're yelling, they're shouting. I don't know how loud their voices got, but they're talking about who is going to be what in the kingdom. They're thinking about another kingdom. You're going to sit on the right hand or left hand of Jesus. Who's more important? Yeah. The disciples are bickering, and Jesus intentionally takes off his cloaks and washes their feet, showing humility, a different kind of kingdom, a different kind of leadership, which is servant leadership. So
yeah, and
it's an amazing week.
It really is.
I like every part of it. Like, Maundy Thursday, of all the services maybe it's among my favorite, but each one of them is powerful on its own. Palm Sunday is powerful. Maundy Thursday is powerful, and Good Friday, of course, is, there's no words.
Yeah.
And then
I love one of the things I love about kind of like Holy Week and I mean, really starting today and thinking about these parades and stuff like that is how Jesus's way feels so much more accessible than what Rome was showing and stuff like that. Because with Rome, you had to basically fall in line and just live within your space. But like when Jesus is coming in through the poorer side, washing disciples' feet, like you see, he's like, you come and be with me. Like there's no real prerequisite. I will serve you. I will be here with you. You know what I mean? Like it's just such a beautiful
Jesus gets
imagery.
Jesus gets interpreted in so many different ways.
Yeah.
And people sometimes use it to sort of fit whatever their worldview might be. And it seems like we're seeing more and more of that today with some of the Christian nationalism, stuff like that. I don't see how you can read through the Gospels and not see this very, very different approach and way that is not the approach of the empire.
Right.
It's not might makes right.
Right.
We're gonna squash all dissenters or anybody that disagrees with us. It is something that is open and accepting, and really is kind of stays out of that fray and goes to the people that have been left out, who are on the margins, to bring about justice and love.
Yeah.
And so it's an amazing. It is an amazing week in the life of church, and each year as it comes back around, you've asked me the question before: how do you find something new? And I do try to look for some new, but I think it's good for us to be reminded each year, even if it's the same text, even if it is a story, that it be fresh on our minds.
I think it's I agree, especially here, because like. There's so much of our faith that hinges on a lot of what happens, not just this week, but this is kind of the culmination of Jesus's life, and we are here to model. I tell the confirmands, when we say we're a Christian, we're claiming to be Christ-like, and this is a lot of where we see what Christ was like, and how do we continue to live through that. And I think as we go through kind of each step of really the season of Lent is kind of reminding ourselves, who was Christ, how did he live, and how do we continue to take that forward? You were talking about Holy Week, and we have a lot of ways that you can reflect on that in service, but even personally, slowing down to say, how am I living my life like Jesus? How am I being as open and accepting as Jesus was? Like, there's a lot of questions you can ask yourself during this season, and not just wait until Easter where we can go, but to say like, he really did so much leading up to that spot too.
Yeah. One of the practices that I do every year, and actually I wish that I had provided those resources, but if you're interested in this, if you're hearing this, it's easy enough to Google, what was Jesus doing on Monday? What are the texts that we know that we associate with Monday of Holy Week? What are the texts that we associate on Tuesday? I'm preaching at another church on Tuesday for a Lenten series they're doing, and I'm going to use as a text those texts from what happened on Tuesday. I think Wednesday is the day that we're not real sure. We attribute some things, but we know from the pace of the week, what he's doing on Monday, what he's doing on Tuesday, what he's doing Thursday and Friday, and then Saturday in the tomb. But the cross is the symbol of our faith, right?
Sure.
The empty cross.
Yep.
Symbol of our faith. And so we should ask our questions, why is that? And what led him to be put on that cross?
Yeah.
And so, we celebrate and acknowledge the sins of the world, including our own. But there were specific things, political things, that led him to that on that first Holy Week. And we need to be mindful of that and be on the lookout from when they enter our world, and where we see that. And I think I closed the service or towards the end of the service talking about like, what is our line in the sand? Some people speak up about everything. Mm-hmm. And I think there's wisdom in looking at the silence that Jesus had when he let his actions speak. But what is it that would cause us to speak out? What are our lines in the sand that we might say, hey, that's a bridge too far?
Yeah.
So anyway, just a food for thought.
No, that's a great thing to reflect on, something that we can take with us this week. And as we're here to kind of wrap up the podcast, I just want to remind you guys of some of the ways that you can reflect, meditate, follow along this week with us here at Hickory Flat. Just with a few of our services on Monday, Thursday at 7:00 in the sanctuary, we have our Monday, Thursday service. If you're listening, or you know somebody who's listening that would like to come to it, we'd love to invite anybody. I think that's one of the beautiful things about the Methodist Church is our communion tables are always open.
Yeah.
So anybody, we'd love to have you, be able to have you be part of that, part of the story. And then on Good Friday, we'll actually have the sanctuary open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., where we'll have the Stations of the Cross, where you can kind of walk through Good Friday at your own pace. You can spend 30 minutes at each station. You can come spend 30 seconds at each station. It's really up to you, but the sanctuary is open for you to just kind of come, reflect, think through all that good stuff. That'll be from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And then at 12 o'clock, Dave's actually going to be leading like a prayer service
we read through the last thing that Jesus said at the cross. We say it's 7 last words of Jesus, seven last. We do that. There's no sermon or anything. It's really just reading and reflection on that day. It's very contemplative, and people seem, in the prior years we've done it, have been moved by it.
Yeah.
Maundy Thursday is more of a traditional service. It'll be, of course, centered around the events of Maundy Thursday, and then go ahead and finish it out.
And then we get to Easter, and there's a lot of times that you can come celebrate with us on Easter. We have a 7 o'clock sunrise service, which will be out at our amphitheater. And if you've never been to the property, our parking lot's a big square, and it's in the back left corner. You'll see it. There's a gravel path that kind of leads out there, and there'll be people there to greet you and welcome you.
To get you down there.
So come meet us out there at 7 o'clock if you're interested. We also have 2 services which are identical at 9 and 11:15. So if you're one that wants to sleep in a little bit, come to the 11:15. If you want to kind of get up and get going, come to the 9 o'clock. And that's going to kind of be probably our bigger celebrations of the day. But then in between those, we have a church-wide Easter egg hunt for the kids. So a lot of eggs are going to be out on the field. I think Nicole said like 4,000 eggs or something like that. So there'll be a lot of eggs. It'll be a great time. And again, just want to invite you to come join us, whether you have kids or not. It's just a good way to kind of celebrate your Easter as a community. And
I'm really looking forward to the sunrise service this year because have you've been down there, right? You've seen.
Oh yeah, I love the sunrise service.
Well, no, you've been down to since they've
for the amphitheater.
We had an Eagle Scout project where they built a kind of a covering over the amphitheater. It's very cool down there now. It was cool before, but it really is.
It's nice. It kind of builds in the space.
It really makes it look really sharp.
Yeah.
So that's always a great service as well. What's the weather supposed to be like? You check the weather?
No clue. I was actually just thinking that because in the past it's been pretty chilly.
Super cold one year.
But hopefully it'll warm up a little bit. But you'll probably need a hoodie or something.
Yeah, we're recording this today on Sunday.
Yes,
Palm Sunday.
So who knows?
It's supposed to be up into the 80s this week.
That's right.
Today. So hopefully we'll have that on Easter.
Yeah. It'll be a good time either way. We'll be out there. But we want to say thank you guys again for watching. Thank you for joining us. If you have any questions, any thoughts that you want to add to the conversation we've just had, drop it in the comments section on the Facebook, the YouTube, wherever you're taking this in from. And without further ado, Dave, anything else to add at the end?
Have a holy week.
Have a great Holy Week, and we'll catch you guys next time.
Yeah, God bless.